No one expected what would happen inside a quiet group home in Lockport, and what started as a normal evening would end in a case that still raises one chilling question. How was this ever allowed to happen? On June 8, 2009, 24-year-old Renee Greco was doing her job at Avenue House, a state-licensed group home for teenage boys. She sat at a table playing cards with the residents she was responsible for caring for. To anyone watching, it looked normal, routine, safe. But within that same room, two of those teenagers were planning something she had no idea about. Renee Greco wasn't just a staff member. She was someone who chose this path after losing her father, wanting to help young people who were struggling. She had earned her degree in human services, believed in the system, and took a job at Avenue House thinking she could make a difference. What she didn't know was that some of the residents had violent histories she was never fully told about. Before accepting the job, she had asked a direct question. Had any staff ever been attacked here before? She was told no, but the reality of the facility was very different. One resident in particular, Anthony Allen, had already shown aggressive behavior. Friends later said Renee had even reported feeling unsafe around him, that he had threatened her before, and at one point tried to push her downstairs. Nothing changed. No removal, no protection, no intervention. On the night everything happened, a small theft of $160 from a lockbox triggered an internal response. Staff began questioning residents and threatened police involvement. For Anthony Allen, who was just days away from being released, this meant one thing. If fingerprints were taken, everything would be exposed, and that's when a decision was made. A plan formed between Anthony Allen and another resident, Robert Thousand. The goal wasn't random violence. It was calculated. They needed a moment where Renee would be isolated, distracted, and alone. So they chose something that seemed harmless. A card game. Something so normal it wouldn't raise suspicion. Renee sat down with them. She dealt the cards. She trusted the moment completely, but what she didn't realize was that she had been placed exactly where they wanted her, with her back turned, close to the stairs, with no easy escape. Then everything changed in seconds. A blanket was thrown over her head. A weapon taken from inside the building was used repeatedly. Her final moments were brief and chaotic, with only fragments of resistance. Other residents in the house later described hearing the sounds, but not fully understanding what was happening until it was too late. After the attack, the group fled. They took her belongings, tried to steal a vehicle, failed, and then used the facility van instead. They even attempted to buy time, stopping at a store and planning to escape on a bus out of town. But they never made it. Police had already been alerted. A 911 call from inside the home confirmed the attack. Within hours, officers located and arrested them before they could leave the area. Anthony Allen and Robert Thousand were charged with murder and robbery. At first, both denied responsibility, but over time, the case began to split. Robert later accepted a plea deal in exchange for testimony, reducing his sentence but confirming key details of what happened inside the home. At trial, the defense tried to shift responsibility across multiple residents, arguing it wasn't a single act, but a group situation. They claimed different people inflicted different injuries. They pointed to inconsistencies, conflicting statements, and another resident who may have been closer to the scene than admitted. But the prosecution focused on one core argument: planning, not chaos. Not confusion, but intent. Witness testimony described threats made earlier in the day, a conversation about wanting to handle the situation, and a deliberate setup that placed Renee exactly where they needed her. After weeks of trial, the jury returned a guilty verdict on all major charges. Anthony Allen was sentenced to 25 years to life. But what shocked many wasn't just the crime. It was what he said in court afterward. Instead of remorse, he insulted the judge, denied responsibility, and blamed the system for his conviction. The judge responded with words that would later define the case, saying she had rarely looked into the eyes of someone she believed to be a monster. But even after sentencing, the biggest question remained. How did this situation ever exist in the first place? Because Renee wasn't placed in a secure facility with trained protection. She was working alone in a group home, responsible for multiple older teenage residents, some with violent backgrounds that were never fully disclosed to her. The system had already shifted years earlier, moving high-risk juveniles from secure institutions into community homes like Avenue House. The intention was reform, but the execution left dangerous gaps. Limited staffing, incomplete background sharing, and no guarantee of safety for workers inside those homes. On the night Renee was killed, she was the only staff member on duty. No backup, no protection, no awareness of the full risk. After her death, the facility was shut down. Investigations were launched. Laws were proposed in her name calling for full background disclosure, risk classification systems, and mandatory staffing protections. But the legislation struggled to pass and was repeatedly delayed. Even today, those reforms remain incomplete. In the end, the case isn't only about what happened inside that room, but about how many warnings were ignored before it ever reached that point. And the hardest question remains unanswered. If the system had been different, would Renee Greco still be alive today?